So this may interest the interested. So I was doing a wee bit of reading here, and the basics, right? So we have a 4-stroke engine here. We've got our intake stroke, where you can see the intake valve is opening, the piston descending, causing a relative vacuum in the cylinder, pulling in the air and the fuel. On the compression stroke, the intake, both valves are closed. Compression stroke, piston comes up, compressing the fuel-air mixture. And if the engine's nicely in time, basically top dead center-ish, we'll have the ignition, of course, expanding the fuel-air mixture in a controlled burn, forcing the piston down on the power stroke, and of course the exhaust stroke with the exhaust valve opening, discharging the rubbish, and the whole system starts over again. Well, so what? This is no new. If you're watching this channel, you're probably no stranger to this at all, so why am I showing you this? Well, it's occurred to me more and more lately that there's some really interesting parallels between the automotive industry and the aviation industry. The not new, that's no new thought either. It's just I don't see a great deal of coverage on it on YouTube, so I thought maybe it'd be interesting to point a few things out, right? So this is an obvious place to start. Maybe we'll look a wee bit deeper. One thing that comes to mind right away is a turbocharger, how it has an interesting compressor and turbine, which actually sounds a lot like a jet engine. Jet engines have full authority digital electronic control, which sounds a lot FADEC, which sounds a lot like engine electronic control. And you know, in industry, of course, they're all stealing off one another. The engineers might even swap from industry to industry. I don't know. I'm sure there is some degree of that going on. But the parallels can be quite interesting indeed. So what I've actually got here is Rolls-Royce. I've actually published this excellent textbook. I'll show you the cover before I close. And they're actually making the comparison between the 4-stroke engine, the 4 different strokes, and the jet engine. So maybe this doesn't interest you, but maybe if you're interested in the automotive world, you're a mechanic, or at least shade tree mechanic like myself, just a novice, the parallels are strikingly obvious. So here we have a jet engine, and don't be overwhelmed by the different look of it. It's pretty much the same thing as this, only instead of in a reciprocating form, it's basically in a continuous, all in a continuous stream. There is no separate strokes per se. That's how you can realize the efficiency of a jet engine, a turbine. So what we have here is the intake side of things. You can see how we have a compressor section here. There's multiple stages to the compressor. This is just a single stage engine, single spool engine. Some of them are more complex with double spool and triple spool, but this will serve our purposes. It's a nice simple drawing. So you can see here that the compressor section is tantamount to the intake and compression stages. You can see as the air actually comes through, it's an axial compressor. Sometimes it's a centrifugal compressor on the older style jets, or even some newer auxiliary power units actually continue to use centrifugal compressors. They're not obsolete by any stretch of the imagination. So you can see as the air travels through, this whole unit is spinning, of course. So a single shaft compressor with a single shaft through to the turbine. So we get compression as the different stages actually rotate of the compressor blades. There's usually multiple stator stages as well, and like guide vanes and stator stages, but no need to discuss that at the moment. We can consider that later, maybe if anybody's interested. But anyway, as you can see how it comes through, you can see that we can actually get higher and higher pressure as we work through the different stages of compression until we get into the diffuser section here, where the pressure will continue to rise. We come into the combustion chambers here. There's usually multiple cans around the engine. In the burner cans themselves, you'll find the fuel nozzles, fuel injectors, if you will. So you can see here, this is where we actually mix air and fuel, and this is actually our combustion or our power stage. So here, obviously the fuel and air will actually burn. It comes past the discharges from the combustor can and actually goes across the turbine stages here. There's usually multiple stages of turbines. So the job of the turbine, of course, is to extract the thermal energy, the heat energy, and the kinetic energy of the discharge air actually going past the turbine itself, and of course it through the common spool actually rotates the compressor section, and of course the exhaust is ducted out the rear end of the engine. So that's how we actually generate thrust on the engine in a very simplified explanation. So you can see here, and of course that's tantamount to the exhaust stroke. So if you know the intake, compression, power and exhaust, it's not a big leap to actually be very familiar with what's going on here. I'm not trying to say it is, and you know, this is any better or any higher concept. No, really, it's really the same thing. So interesting. So as I said, I want to point out one other thing that I found very interesting, and this is a really good textbook. I've had it for years. But here's a drawing here, and this actually shows a centrifugal compressor here on this particular drawing. But if you look at the drawing here, this is pretty much the same engine we just considered. Here's temperature and pressure relationships on a graph. One would think that in the combustor can, just like the power stroke on a four-stroke engine, one would think in the combustor can, where you have the fuel and the air and the fuel mixing, and you have the ignition and the actual burn going on inside the can, you would think that would be the highest pressure in the engine. Well, at least on the surface of it you would. But it's not true. The actual highest pressure in the engine is here between the compressor and the burner cans. There's a diffuser section, and that's actually where the highest pressure is here, the blue line. If you look at that, that's kind of interesting. Of course, the difference being is open-ended, unlike in a four-stroke engine where both valves are closed and it's a closed cylinder. This is open-ended. That's why you have this difference in the temperature and pressure relationship between the jet engine and the four-stroke engine. Anyway, I found that kind of interesting. Same applies for the centrifugal compressor type. Two centrifugal compressors here, but you can see the temperature and the pressure. Still, that relationship is pretty much the same, right? So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, and maybe some of you guys would find it interesting. And we'll leave it at that for now.